In this Blender tutorial, I'll show you how to create these stylized Christmas presents, and we're going to be rendering this with the Eevee rendering engine. Now, if you want to use the Cycles rendering engine, you can, but I am going to be using this shader to RGB in the node setup to kind of get this cool, sharp, stylized lighting, and the shader to RGB node in the materials doesn't work in Cycles. So you can do the tutorial in Cycles, but you'll have to set up the materials differently because, again, the shader to RGB doesn't work in Cycles, it only works in Eevee. And if you'd like to purchase the finished project files and help support the channel, you can get that with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. And you can also check out my Christmas tutorial playlist to watch more of my Christmas themed tutorials. And then one more thing before we start, I wanted to let you know about my customizable Christmas lights created with geometry nodes. With my geometry node Christmas lights, you can decorate your Christmas and holiday scenes. You can edit the curve handles to place the Christmas lights. You can also use the curved draw feature in edit mode to draw the Christmas lights to fill your scenes. The geometry node modifier has many customizable values to control the Christmas lights. The Christmas light colors are also customizable. You can Control-Shift select the node to view all of the different colors. To make the lights twinkle, just plug the twinkling lights node into the light string. You can then animate the twinkling lights value to make the lights twinkle in an animation. If you'd like to purchase the product, you can find the product links in the description. So in a new scene in Blender, I'm just going to select everything and we'll just delete everything, and then I'll go to the add menu and we'll just add a new cube because, you can't use the default cube, you have to delete it and then add a new cube. So I want to scale this better to the real life scale in Blender because the default objects are quite large. So I'm going to scale this object down and I'll type 0.2 and then I'll just press Ctrl A and apply the scale, so that's the new default size of the object. Let's save our file, so we'll click on File and Save. And I'll just save this in a folder with my project files. You can call it Presents and Save Blender File. Now, because we're making this a stylized present, I want to make it kind of look like it's bulging out on the edges to kind of give a stylized look. So we'll go into Edit mode. So I'll hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I'll scroll my mouse wheel till there are 3 loop cuts, and I can left click and then right click so the loops stay in the center, and then I can just scale the loop cuts out a little bit, and then I'll deselect everything, hold down the Alt key and just select the center loop and scale it out a little bit. So you can see now the Christmas presents are bulging out just a little bit on the sides. Now let's click over here to the modifiers and we'll click on Add Modifier. We're going to search for Bevel. We'll just add the Bevel modifier and I'll turn the segments up to like a 3, and then I'm also going to drag this amount down to make it kind of small. So something like that, and then I'll use the Object Context menu and shade it smooth. And then also I will press Ctrl 1. So Ctrl 1 is going to add a subdivision surface modifier, and I'll just leave the viewport and render levels both set to 1. So I now want to make the lid of the present, so I'll go into edit mode and I'll click here to go to the face select, and we'll just select the top face. And I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, bring it up on the Z axis. Let's go to front view and I can scale it up a bit and bring it up, and then I can extrude it down, and then we're also going to scale it up a little bit. Again, just to kind of give it that stylized look, we're going to have the bottom of the lid here just scaled up a little bit more. And then also I need to select everything and I'll hit Shift N to recalculate the normals. So now we can add the ribbon, which is around the present. So I'm going to hit Shift C to make sure the 3D cursor is in the center of the scene, and I'll go to the add menu and I'm going to add a plane, and we'll bring the plane up on the Z axis. Then we'll hit tab to go into edit mode, and I'll scale the plane down much smaller and also scale it down on the X axis like that, so it's a lot more thin, and then we'll also bring it over on the Y axis. And then I want to mirror it to the other side, so we'll click on Add Modifier, we're going to add a mirror modifier, and we're just going to mirror it on the Y axis. Then I also want to click on the clipping button, so turn that on, and that way if I hit G to grab and bring the plane forward into the mirror, you can see now it's going to merge together, so now it's stuck together there in the center of the mirror. So let's now add a Solidify modifier, so we'll go to Add Modifier, we're going to add a Solidify modifier so it's thicker, and let's just drag the thickness out, so something like that, and then bring it down on the Z axis so that the thickness is going right there down into the present just a little bit. And that might be a little bit too thick, so maybe I'll make it thinner, and then in edit mode, bring it down just a little bit. And then I'll hit Ctrl 2 to add a subdivision surface with 2 levels. So if I scroll down here, you can see we now have a subsurf modifier. Let's just click on these arrows here just to make these smaller because we have a lot of them. So I'll just minimize those modifiers, and then I'll use the Object Context menu and shade it smooth. Let's go back into edit mode, and I want to add some loops on the edges to kind of sharpen it. So I'll hit Ctrl R, and I'll scroll my mouse wheel till there are 2, and I can left click and right click so they stay in the center, and then I can scale them, and we'll scale them on the X axis, bring that out like that, just so that the edges are a bit sharper. Let's now click here to go to the vertex select, and I'll hold down the shift key, and we're going to select all these vertices here on the end, and let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'm going to bring this back a bit. So I'm now just going to zoom into the side of the present, and I'll hit E to extrude and just continue to extrude this out, and we're just going to extrude it down along the side here of the present, and then right here where it's rotating, we can extrude it out more times so that's more smooth, and extrude that out there, and then go all the way down here. And when it's this part here where it's more flat, you can just extrude it out a lot larger, so have larger extrusions. And then right here you can kind of extrude it out by small amounts so it rotates a bit better. Also, you can go to wireframe and box select some points and bring it in there if it's a bit too far, and then just box select that there and just extrude that over, and then extrude into the mirror. And because we have the clipping turned on, it's going to connect there just like that. So go back to object mode, and we now have that little ribbon there around the present. Let's hit Control S to save. So I'm now going to select the object, and I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, and I can hit R to rotate. Let's rotate it on the Z axis, and I'll type in 90 and then enter. And now what I want to do is I want to make one of these kind of higher up and one of them lower down. So I'll select this one here, the one that we duplicated. We'll go into edit mode, and I'll hold down the Shift and Alt key, and we're going to select that loop and that loop. And let's bring it down on the Z axis, and then hold down the Alt key and select that loop there and bring it down a little bit farther. So I'll go back to object mode, and I'm going to select this one here, and we'll hit Tab to go back in edit mode. And I'm going to hit Control R to add a loop cut. We'll drop a loop cut there, and then also Control R, add another loop cut and put it there. So now if I hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop there, I can bring both of these loops up just a little bit. And then this one, maybe bring it down a little bit. You could also add another loop cut there and maybe bring it up a little bit. So you can see what we've done is we've basically brought this up higher. So now it looks like this piece is going over the other piece. And then down here on the bottom, let's do kind of a similar thing. But for the bottom piece, I'm not going to be able to see it that well in the render because it's on the bottom here. So I'm just going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to go into wireframe, and I'm just going to box select the bottom pieces here, and I'll bring it up on the Z axis just like that. And then if we go back into object mode, I'll select the other object. We'll go into edit mode. I'm just going to hold down the Shift and Alt key and select these pieces and kind of bring them down so it's a little bit farther down. So now let's add the bow on the top. So I'm just going to select one of these, and we'll go into edit mode, and I'll hold down the Alt key and select one of the loops, and I'll duplicate it and move it up. Then I'll hit the P key, and I'm going to separate by selection. I can go back to object mode, and now this is its own object. So we'll go into edit mode, and I'll select everything, and I'll extrude it, and we'll extrude it towards the mirror and just stick it there so it connects. And then if I just select everything, I will bring everything down there just so it's down like that. And then we'll also scale it down on the x-axis so it's a little bit thinner than the other ribbon there. Go back to object mode, and I can use the object context menu and shade it smooth. And then I'll go back into edit mode and go into wireframe and just deselect everything, and we'll hold down the Alt key and select that loop there, and we'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. We can go back to solid view. So I can now just extrude this out, and we'll bring it down, kind of extrude it out again, and extrude it, and just extrude it all the way around so we kind of get that bow shape. Going around there, and then extrude it down, and then right here it's going to get really close to the starting of the bow, and then bring it in here and just connect it up. Like that. Let's go back into wireframe, just box select some of these pieces and move them around a bit, box select that and move it around a little bit. So that is pretty good. I do think it's a little bit thick, so if I just click here to open up the solidify, let's just drag the solidify value down a little bit so it's a little bit more thin, and then maybe I will hold down the Shift and Alt key and select these pieces and bring them down a little bit. So something like that's pretty good. I think I will select everything in edit mode, and I'm going to scale everything up a little bit and bring it out a little bit, and then maybe scale it down on the x-axis so it's a little bit more thin. So just kind of getting those proportions how I want. Let's hit Control S to save the project. So I now want to make one more ribbon piece, which is kind of a circle going around the opposite direction. So I will just select this piece here, go into edit mode, hold down the Alt key and just select one of the loops, and I will duplicate it and move it up. And then I'll hit the P key, and I'm going to separate by selection. We'll go back to object mode. I'll select the new object, and we'll go into edit mode, and I'll select everything, and I can extrude it into the mirror just like that. Go back to object mode, and then I can use the object context menu to shade it smooth. Let's hit 7 to go to top view, and I'm going to rotate it. We'll rotate it by 90 degrees, hit enter, and then we can just bring this down here, or maybe go into edit mode and just bring it down in edit mode. And we're going to bring it right down there into the bottom. We'll go into wireframe and just hold down the Alt key and select that loop there, and we'll go back to solid view. Let's hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and then I can just start to extrude this up and extrude it around and then extrude around, and you might want to go back into wireframe so you can see it better, and extrude again, and then extrude it there so it connects with the mirror. Go back to solid view. That's looking pretty good. Let's maybe bring it out so it's a little bit thicker. and then bring it over a little bit. And then also I might hold down the Alt key and select that loop, and Shift and Alt and select those loops there. And maybe I'll bring the whole thing up a little bit just to kind of get the shape better to how I like. And I think I want to select this loop and maybe bring it up a little bit, and then select this loop and bring it down a little bit and maybe back so it's a little bit sharper. Maybe select the entire thing and bring it in a little bit, and maybe bring that loop back a little bit. So that's pretty good. So I now want to model kind of those triangle end pieces, which are at the end of the bow or the end of the ribbon. So I'm just going to select another one of these pieces, go into edit mode, and I'll just duplicate a loop again. We will hit P, separate by selection. We'll go back to object mode and just select this piece here, and I'll go into edit mode. And what I want to do here is open up the mirror, and then we'll just click on the X here to get rid of the mirror. So I can now select this piece and I will extrude it, and we'll just extrude it forward there. And then let's go back to object mode and just shade it smooth. And we'll go into edit mode again, and we're going to select everything, and we'll scale it down on the Y axis so it's a little bit more thin. And then we'll bring it down on the Z axis like that. And let's just create one of those ribbon pieces. So hold down the Alt key, select that piece there, and bring it back a little bit. And then what I want to do is add a loop cut here. So I'll hit Control R to add a loop cut, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel till there are 3 cuts, and then I can left click and right click so they stay where they are. Let's go to wireframe so I can actually see this, and we're going to scale this down, and we're going to make it really thin. So just scale it down on the Y-axis so all those pieces are really close to each other. We can also maybe bring this up if you need to see that better. And also one thing we can do, if we want the pieces to be on top instead of on the bottom, we can just select everything and then hit Shift N to recalculate the normals, and then click behind me on the recalculate normals option. And right behind me, you'll need to click on that inside button right there. That's going to flip the normals. So now the solidify is on the other side. So now I can see the modeling better. So I'm just going to bring this down here and I can model this better. So now what I want to do is select this vertex here, hold down the Shift key and select these other vertices. And we'll go to top view. And I can now extrude this out, bring it over here. And then what I want to do is just model the piece so it looks like a triangle. So I'll select this vertex and bring it back, bring the vertex forward, bring this vertex over here, and this one kind of over here, like that. Maybe rotate it a little bit, just so we get kind of that triangle shape. So just like that. And we'll do the same thing for the other side. So hold down the Shift key and select all of these vertices, and we'll extrude it out to about the same amount. And then we'll select this piece here and bring it back a little bit and bring this forward. And then these pieces, we'll rotate them and bring them back. Kind of like that, maybe bring this down, something like that. So now we have that triangle piece. But you can see because of the subdivision surface modifier, it's kind of acting all smooth. So what I want to do is go back into edit mode and hit Control R to add a loop cut. We'll drag the loop cut over here to kind of sharpen it. Control R to add another loop cut and drag this over here to kind of sharpen it there. And then we'll hit Control R to add another loop cut, and we're going to bring this loop cut over here to sharpen it right there. So now you can see that it's much more sharp there on the end. Let's also hit Control R to add another loop cut, and we can sharpen this up, and Control R again and drag this over to kind of sharpen that up there. All right, and then we'll bring everything down and maybe scale everything down just a little bit. And this part right here, I want it to be a little bit wavy, so let me just pull it out a little bit. And we'll go to top view and go into edit mode. I'll hold down the Alt key and select that loop there, and I'll bring it forward a little bit, and then I can extrude it, maybe bring it over here, and then extrude it and kind of rotate it, and extrude it again and kind of rotate it like that. And then let's go into wireframe, and we'll just box select that part there, and I can kind of rotate it just like that. So now you can see it kind of is wavy, it's going back and forth. So now we'll, in object mode, just bring it over here and maybe rotate it and kind of stick it over here, maybe scale it. And back in edit mode, we can just kind of adjust where it's going to be. So we'll just stick it there so it's just coming out of the bow there. And then we'll go back to object mode, we'll go to top view, and I'll duplicate the object and rotate it just so we have one more. We can go into edit mode and I'll select everything. And then I want to flip these so it's going in the opposite direction. So what I'm going to do is just scale it. We'll scale it on the Y-axis, and I'll type -1 and enter. And just maybe bring it over here and rotate it a little bit. I'll just put another one kind of right over here, and then maybe this one rotate over a little bit. So there we go, we now have those end pieces of the ribbons coming out of the bow. Let's now do the lighting. So I'm going to click over here to go to the render properties, and here on the render engine, I'm going to use Blender Eevee because we're going to be using that shader to RGB node, which only works in Eevee. We can also turn on the ray tracing right here, and that's just going to make Blender Eevee look a little bit nicer using that ray tracing. Now I am going to be adding in an HDRI from Polyhaven.com, so I'll have the link in the video description if you want to download the same HDRI that I'm using. using. So let's click over here to the world properties, and let's click here on the yellow dot next to color, and we're going to choose environment texture, and then we'll click on the open button to open up the texture. So here's the HDRI from polyhaven.com. It's the Abandoned Hopper Terminal 01, and I downloaded the 1K version and the HDR version. So again, link is in the description if you want to download it, and I'll click on open image. So let's hold down the Z button, and we'll go into the rendered viewport mode to see how this is looking. And I'm going to turn the strength of the world down to like a 0.3 so it's not quite as bright, because I do want to add some other area lights to make it brighter. Let's also click here to go to the render properties, and I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, and here in the color management I'll be using AGX, and then on the look here I'm going to change this to very high contrast to make it more saturated and contrasted. But it's really dark right now, so let's add some area lights. So I'll go to the add menu, I'll go here to light, and I'll add an area light. Let's rotate the area light and kind of move it over here. And if I go to the light settings, I'm going to take the square here and I'm going to change it to disk so it is circular. And I'll turn the power up to like a 20. And then I'll also duplicate this light, move it over here, and I'll rotate it over so we have another light here on the other side. Let's also add a camera. So I'll go to the add menu, we'll go here to camera and just add a camera. I'm going to move my view to about where I want the camera to be, and I'll hit Control Alt and Numpad 0. Control Alt and Numpad 0 will bring the camera to my view, and then if I select the camera, I can hit G to grab and kind of move it around. And then also let's take the focal length here on the object data properties of the camera, and I'm going to turn the focal length up to 90 to kind of zoom the camera in a bit and make it look more flat. And then I'll hit G to grab, and I can double tap the Z key to bring the camera out and just point it at the presence. Let's go here to the render properties, actually the output properties, and I want to make this a square image. So I'm going to turn the resolution X and Y to 1920. So 1920 by 1920. We can zoom the camera in now a little bit more. Let's also go to the add menu and we'll add a ground plane. So we'll go to mesh and we'll add a plane, and I can scale the plane up so it's pretty big, and we'll go to side view and I'll just bring the plane down so the present is just resting there on the plane. So let's now set up the materials. So we'll first select the floor, and I'm going to click here to go to the shading workspace, and let's go into the camera view and go into the rendered viewport mode. Let's click on new to add a new material, and I can just rename this to floor. Now for this, I'm just going to make the base color a blue color. So we're going to make it kind of like a dark blue. So I'm going to be using this dark blue color for the base color, and if you want to use the exact same hex value that I'm using, you can punch in 1C, 31, 4E, FF. That is the color that I'll be using. So let's now create that stylized shader there for the present. So I'm going to select the present, we'll click on new, and I'm going to rename this to red present. Now for the base color, for now I'm just going to make it this red color here, and if you want to use the same color I'm using, you can punch in F2, 1A, 00, FF. And then also let's turn the roughness down to like a 0.4 so it's a bit more shiny. So this material does look okay, but it is really simple, and I want to make it look really contrasty and sharp and have some really bright reflections to kind of give it that stylized shading. So to do this, we are going to go to the add menu and we're going to search for the shader to RGB node. We'll drop this here in between the principled and the material output. So it's going to take the shader data and it's going to turn it into just color data. Now it doesn't really look like anything's changing, and that's because right now it just looks like the shader, but it's actually color data. But what we can do with this now is we can go to the add menu and we can search for a color ramp and drop the color ramp after the shader to RGB. And we now have these cool values here that we can change with the color ramp, and we can make it look really sharp and contrasty and give it a cool stylized shader. So what I want to do is drag the white tab kind of to about here. Let's also drag the black tab out so it's a bit contrasty, but then I'm also going to hold down the control key and click here about in the middle to make it a gray color, and I'm going to make it the same red color. So I will just click and drag and drop the color there into that color ramp there, and you can now see we have some really cool stylized shading because we have dragged these color ramps together. It's going to be much more contrasty and sharp, so the shadows are really sharp, but then also the highlights there are really bright. Now this is also heavily determined on the lighting, so if I select the lighting and bring the lighting forward, you can see there's going to be a lot more of that white because it's really blown out and bright. And also here on the world properties, if you turn up the world strength, that's also going to affect it. So just keep that in mind, that if you have a different lighting setup than mine, then the material might look a bit different. So that's why I'm going to maybe scale this up and bring it back a little bit and just kind of play around with where the lighting is so we have that really sharp reflection there. And this color here, make sure that is fully white. So we have those really cool reflections, but then there's also some really dark shadows and then a really sharp red color. So that just gives us a really cool stylized material. You can see here it is before, it just kind of looks kind of bland and kind of like a basic plastic, but then here it is after, so you can see before and after. So it really does give a cool stylized material to the present. So I'm now going to add a similar material to the ribbon. So let's just click and drag here with the material, and we can drop it here on one of the ribbons. So we'll just select the ribbon, but then I want to duplicate the material. So we're going to click on the button here, which are like the two pieces of paper icon. And this one, I'm going to call it gold ribbon. Now for this material, pretty much everything is going to stay the same, except I'm going to turn the metallic value all the way up to 1 so it looks like metal, and then also we're going to change the color ramp. So let's just drag the tabs a little bit farther away so they're not as contrasty, and then this color here, we're going to make it kind of like a goldish color. And if you want to use the same exact hex value that I'm using, the hex value here for this gold color is going to be F29600FF. And then let's hold down the control key and click here to add another tab. And this one I'm going to have that same gold color. Now for the black color, I'm going to have it be a very dark gold color. And this one, the hex value is going to be 583700FF. And then we can kind of play around with the colors here. So you can kind of drag this out if you want more light, or you can drag the white out for the reflections, or if you want to be a lot darker, you can drag the black tab over. I'm just going to have the black tab pretty small over here, and the white tab I'll kind of put over here and kind of drag this over. Just like that. So now you can see we have that really cool kind of gold ribbon material. So now what I'm going to do is hold down the shift key, and I'm going to select all of the other ribbon objects, and I'm going to lastly select this one here. I'm now going to hit Control L, and I'm going to click on Link Materials. So now they all have the same material, so we have that really cool stylized shading. So now what I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to select all of the objects. So just make sure all of the objects are selected, and I'll go to Top View, and I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, and I can rotate the object. And let's maybe rotate it the opposite way, kind of over like that. And we'll maybe bring it behind the present. So what you can do is hit G to grab, and then you can hit Shift Z. And Shift Z will exclude the Z axis. So you can just bring it along the ground and just kind of place it where you want. So I'm just going to stick it maybe right there. All right, so now I'm going to duplicate the materials and make them different. So we'll click on the red object here, and we'll click on this button here to duplicate the material. And this one, I'm going to call it blue present. And then for the blue one, I'm going to make it this color here, and the hex value is going to be 3B 6A F2 FF. And then also let's click on the black tab and maybe drag it back a little bit. If it's a little bit too contrasty, you can of course play around with the contrast. Maybe I'll drag the white over so the white's a bit sharper. Now I'm going to select the gold here, the gold ribbon. Let's click on this button to duplicate it. And this one I'm going to call silver ribbon. So for this one, I'm going to select this tab here and hit the minus to get rid of it. And now I'm going to make all of these kind of gray colors. So this is what I'm going to go with. So you can use the same exact hex values if you want to. So this first one here is going to be this gray color, and it's going to be 3A, 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 FF. And then also this one here, this gray color, this is going to be a hex value of A6, 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 FF. And then this one here is just going to be fully white. And you can kind of drag these around to play with the contrast. So now we have kind of a silver ribbon. So we'll just hold down the shift key and we're going to select all the other objects. And then lastly, shift select the silver one, and we'll hit Control L, and we're going to link the materials so they all have the same material. So we're now just going to select the first one again, just hold down the shift key and select all the objects. You can move it around to make sure you have them all selected, and I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, and then I'll hit Shift Z to exclude the Z axis, and I can stick it there. We'll go into the camera view by hitting the 0 on the numpad, and I can just rotate it a little bit. Let's maybe rotate this one over here to the other side and bring it back a little bit. So now we'll change the materials for this one. So I'll select this one here, and we'll click on this button here to duplicate the material, and then this one here, this one is going to be called green present. And then for this one, I'm going to use this bright green color, and the hex value is going to be 17C600. And you can see the bright light is a little bit strong with this one, so I can maybe kind of drag these back a little bit and maybe drag the black a little bit back, just so it's not quite as contrasty. And then we'll do the same thing for the ribbon. So we'll select the ribbon, we'll hit this button here to duplicate it, and this one I'm going to make it red ribbon. So I'll just call this red ribbon. And then for this one, I'm going to make these two colors be this nice bright red color, and the hex value, if you want to use the same color, is going to be F20300FF. And then for the last tab here, this is going to be like a really dark red, and the hex value for this one is going to be 690400FF if you want to use the same color. And then you can kind of drag these around and just kind of get the reflections to look really nice. So just drag the white tab around. I think I might drag the white tab a little bit back so it's not quite as bright, something like that. So that's looking pretty good. So now just hold down the shift key and select all of the objects here, all the ribbon objects, and then lastly shift select this one last, and I'll hit Control L, and we will link the materials so they all have the same material. And then finally here at the very end, let's click back here to go to the layout and hit Control S to save, and we can just kind of move the light around. So just kind of move the light around so the reflections look nice. Also we'll select this light here, maybe move this forward a little bit and kind of rotate it, maybe even scale up the lights a little bit. And I think the lights could be a little bit brighter, so I might just turn up the lights a little bit, and then I can also duplicate the light and maybe rotate it, and maybe we'll add one more here on the back because the lighting does seem a little bit dark here, so maybe I'll just duplicate the light and just have one more here kind of on the back. You could also go to the world HDRI and just turn up the world HDRI to maybe just like a 0.35 if you want to be a little bit brighter, but that's pretty much going to do it for the render. So then to render the image, you can just save the project by hitting Control S, and you can click on render, and you can just click on render image. And because it's Blender Eevee, it shouldn't take very long to render. Mine finished really quickly. So now to save the image, you can click on image and just click on save as. And you can save the file. I'll just call it present, and I'll save it as a PNG image, and I'll just save the image. So that's going to be it for the tutorial. So that's how you create these stylized Christmas presents in Blender. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and thank you for watching. And Christmas of 2024 is almost here, so Merry Christmas everyone. I hope you all have a great Christmas. And if you guys have any Christmas themed tutorial ideas that you'd like me to make, definitely let me know in the comments. And you can also check out my Christmas tutorial playlist to learn how to create more Christmas artworks. I have a Christmas tree tutorial, I have a Christmas lights tutorial, and a Christmas wreath tutorial, and lots more Christmas themed tutorials. You can also help support the channel by purchasing the finished project files. So if you'd like to purchase the project files, you can get that with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. So that'll be it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.